That's 800-291-3143.
Radio home for Buckeyes football. 1410 WING, Dayton's ESPN Radio. The Justin Kinner Show, right here on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody, happy Thursday. We welcome you in live here on Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM, Dayton's radio home for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Happy Thursday, everybody. We kick off the show like we do each and every Thursday with the one, the only, the voice of the Buckeyes himself, Mr. Paul Keels. Paul, happy Thursday. Welcome, sir.
How you doing, Justin?
Hey, I'm good. I meant to text you the other day and tell you that I set a course record over at Muirfield just last week.
Really?
Yeah, probably the worst score, losing the most balls and breaking the most tees. It was not I mean, you can't have a bad day at Muirfield, but if you could, I probably was testing that theory, to be quite honest with you. It was not good.
Well, getting a chance to play over there is a win, regardless of how badly you play.
Oh, man. But no, happy Thursday. Welcome in. Ohio State, what we'll pick up with the game against Minnesota last Saturday, of course. It's about what we expected. Ohio State just continuing to roll and looking as solid as can be on both offense and defense. And, of course, emergence of more stars coming up on offense as well.
Yeah, I mean, the story of the game really was the defense, the way they were able to shut Minnesota off and just kind of, it's amazing when you think about some of these defensive stats that you're looking at what Ohio State has done. Now you take some consideration into who they play, but their last two opponents, they have held them combined 2 for 22 on third downs. They've only allowed 5 scores all year, 2 passing touchdowns, 3 field goals. They've not allowed any first half touchdowns. But then offensively, as you said, Justin, they were able to show the explosive ability. A play that'll probably stick in a lot of people's minds is the touchdown pass to Carnell Tate, mostly because you just saw Julian saying fake a handoff to a running back, fake a reverse to Jeremiah Smith, and about 4 or 5 defenders followed Jeremiah Smith, and it just set the table for that long touchdown pass to Carnell Tate. So defense playing at a high level, offense showing its explosive abilities.
Paul Keels with us here, voice of the Buckeyes, as we kick the show off here today on a Thursday. You mentioned the play to Carnell Tate, but the overall play of Carnell Tate, 9 catches, 183 yards, that touchdown that you mentioned, Jeremiah Smith, 7 catches, 67 yards, 2 touchdowns. We know that Ohio State's never at a shortage of wide receiver talent, no doubt, and we know Jeremiah Smith is the guy, but are you surprised at the leaps that we've seen from Carnell Tate? Just really, I mean, he's not, obviously no one's going to overtake Jeremiah Smith as wide receiver 1, but it has been beyond fun watching Carnell Tate just emerge into a star this year, something we're really not surprised at as Buckeye fans, seeing another wide receiver step up and be a big name.
Yeah, I'm not totally surprised. I mean, you think back to last year, the game at Northwestern when he had a couple of touchdowns, and that was, Ryan Day had admitted that one of the things they wanted to do with Carnell going to his hometown was get him in the end zone. Folks may or may not be aware that, Carnell's from Chicago. And when he first got to Columbus as a freshman, he endured a horrible tragedy. His mother was killed in a drive-by shooting. And he really was able to get through that difficult time because of the people around him at Ohio State and the way they embraced him. So not only that game, but remember the Texas game, the playoffs, when, the Longhorns really made up their mind they weren't going to let Jeremiah Smith beat him. And I think Carnell had 10 catches in that game. So not totally surprised, but when you look at this offense, it's those two. It's still, I think we're still waiting to see some breakout moments from Brandon Ennis catching the ball. We've seen what the group of tight ends have done. And then, the running backs have been more than serviceable. So it's kind of a pick your poison thing when you're defending Ohio State.
Obviously no one feels bad for any quarterback that has Jeremiah Smith to throw the football to, but sometimes when obviously we're well into the season now, so we don't have to refer to Julian saying as a new quarterback, but one of my concerns, if there were any coming into the season, was sometimes when you have a talent like Jeremiah Smith and you have a quarterback that's, obviously trying to come along as the season goes on, you don't want him to become too dependent. I think it's beyond impressive watching just how Jeremiah Smith takes what the offense gives him. Julian Sain doesn't force the issue, and then also feeling comfortable enough to get so many others involved as well. Just the overall flow of the offense and how comfortable it looks with Jeremiah Smith out there, with replacing some key weapons from last year. It's been pretty exciting to watch as the season's progressed.
It has, and we talked about Julian Sain and just how comfortable he looks out there throwing the ball. And, one of the things we saw last week, Justin, that we hadn't seen before, he took a couple of pretty good licks, especially on that touchdown pass to Carnell Tate, but, shook him off, got right back after things. But, as we talk about all of that, think about it. 5 games into the season, that offensive line has allowed just 2 sacks. So we certainly know that how well the offensive line plays, is going to have a lot to do with protecting the quarterback, letting receivers get open, and opening holes for the running backs.
Next up for the Buckeyes, coming up on Saturday, a noon kick, 10:30 pregame coverage will begin right here on 1410 ESPN Radio and on Z93. You'll hear Paul Keels, of course, getting you set and calling all the action. But, Paul, next up, Illinois. It's a top 25 showdown. The Buckeyes, number one in the country, undefeated, but they're going to be on the road at Illinois. Illinois, a big opportunity from them. We talked about Illinois' tough loss against Indiana a few weeks ago, not just a loss, but getting beat down. But the way that they've bounced back, beating USC, taking care of business like they did last week, it now sets up a big opportunity for Illinois, but another top 25 opportunity for the Buckeyes in their resume moving forward.
Now think about this, Justin. Ohio State has not played Illinois since 2017. They've not played them in Champaign in 10 years. And Ryan Day has never coached as a head coach against Illinois. So it's kind of crazy that here's a team in the Midwest, in the Big Ten, that Ohio State has not seen on their campus in 10 years. However, when you think about what happened to them 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whenever it was against Indiana, Ryan Day's talked about throw that one out. And, keep in mind, too, Illinois was down multiple defensive backs in that game, whether it was by injury, they lost one of them to a targeting call, another to a concussion. So Ryan Day has basically said, throw that out. That's not the team that they're going to see. And Illinois has rebounded nicely. A nice come-from-behind win against USC. They're going to Purdue and beating a Purdue team the way that they should. So it's a team that, they defensively are very difficult. They lead the nation in forcing 8 fumbles. So that's something that certainly will be a concern. They they've recovered 8 of them. They forced 7, I should say. But then offensively, what makes them tick is a third-year starter, Luke Altmaier, who's a transfer, but he's in his 3rd year starting at Illinois. Hank Beatty, their receiver, coming off a big day last week. A couple of very good running backs. So it's a football team that, they've won 15 games in the last 2 years. So Brett Bielema has got something good cooking in Champaign.
Yep, and we're this far into the season. Ohio State's played a lot of home games, only one road game. Of course, the win 24-6 on the road at Washington. This only being their 2nd road game of the season. Of course, a top 25 opponent in Illinois. Again, just the schedule just continue to move along. Ohio State going to be on the road a lot, as we talked about last week. 3 of the next 4 weeks will be on the road. Their next home game will be against Penn State coming up here in a few. Let's talk about Penn State, of course, because, it wasn't a bad loss to Oregon. Obviously, there's expectations for Penn State to be a national championship contender, but there's no shame in losing to Oregon. The Buckeyes won the title last year while losing to Oregon in the regular season. But there might be a little shame when you provide the first win of the season to a team that fired their coach in the middle of the year in front of a couple hundred fans. What happened for James Franklin and Penn State this past weekend?
And not only did UCLA fire their head coach a few weeks ago, going into that game last week, during the week they got rid of their offensive coordinator and just assigned a new play caller on Tuesday of last week. So what happened? I have no idea, Justin. I would have never seen that coming. Now, Penn State came back from a big deficit, made a game out of it, had chances, but couldn't execute late in the game when they really needed to. You just don't know if that was a one-time flash in the pan, new voice, shaking everybody up after the coach was fired. And, Nico Iamaleava played the way people have expected him to play, but he hadn't all year leading up to that point. But that was a real head scratcher. And I feel for Northwestern going to Penn State this week, because that's probably not going to be a pretty thing, possibly. But that was just a real crazy one. And, it continues to pile on all of the talk about James Franklin not being able to help Penn State win top 5 games. It puts them in a very difficult position now, where if there's any chance of them making the playoffs, they don't control their own fate. However, they've got opportunities out there in front of them, including the one you mentioned, November 1st in Columbus against Ohio State.
Is that one? I mean, look, we all knew that game is going to be big no matter what, but it's going to feel huge and more desperate now for Penn State, because with 2 losses at this point, you can maybe redeem one of those tough losses with the win over the number 1 team in the country on the road, in Columbus. But does that make that game a must win for Penn State? I know people hate those labels, but that's a must win for Penn State in Columbus, correct?
I would think so, because even if they win that game, it's not likely, not impossible, but not likely they can get into the Big Ten championship game with 2 losses. So, for them to have a chance to make the playoffs as an at-large, yes, that would be a must-win. So, but as we know, all games are big when people play Ohio State. But, I think everybody, Justin, would agree, Penn State has more talent than UCLA based on players on the hoof, they should win that game 9 times out of 10. But that's what makes it exciting, that you have to play the game, and they just weren't able to make the plays when they needed to.
One of the losses for Penn State was Oregon, obviously, and Oregon looking ahead right now, again, sitting at number 3 in the country. They're undefeated. They have a big one this week against Indiana. Now, you look at some of these tough schedules around college football after their matchup with Indiana coming up. You got Rutgers, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, and then USC and Washington to close it out. But Oregon has a little bit of smooth sailing ahead if they can get past Indiana, who's top 10 in the country. I know Indiana, they've had that big number, that low number in front of their name last year and this season. Some people don't buy into it. Huge opportunity for Indiana and another opportunity for Oregon to get another top 10 win on their resume.
Absolutely. And, I think people now have started to become a little more in the believing category about Oregon and what they've done. And I think if you watch the way Dante Moore plays at quarterback, that was probably the biggest question after Dylan Gabriel was gone. I think he's answered that question to this point. It probably will tell us more about Indiana than it will Oregon, even in a defeat. If Indiana is able to go out there and make it a competitive game and lose, then I think we still have to go along with the feeling that Indiana's got something good going. Their schedule's tougher this year than it was last year. And, when their schedule got tough last year, namely when they came to Columbus, they lost. And, Kurt Cignetti even mentioned the 2 most physical teams they played last year were the 2 games they lost, Ohio State and Notre Dame, in the playoffs. So it'll tell us a lot about both teams, but most likely will tell us a little more about Indiana, even should the game not go the Hoosiers' way.
Last one on the way out, Paul. Michigan, number 15 in the country. They're 4-1. Obviously, their only loss of the season coming earlier in the year against Oklahoma. Oklahoma has a big one, a big rivalry game coming up this weekend. But they're going to be on the road at USC. USC, they're 4-1 as well. They're not ranked. They just lost a few weeks ago against Illinois. 2 big brands, 2 of the biggest brands in the Big Ten going head-to-head. I love this matchup, but there's a lot on the line so early in the season. Both teams trying to prevent picking up their second loss so early in the year.
Yeah, there is a lot on the line, and that's another one where we'll see how much Bryce Underwood has grown up at quarterback for Michigan. I think everybody's becoming a believer in what they can do running the football, even with Underwood running it, and certainly he's shown his ability passing. And there's no question that even though they lost the 2 great defensive players they did last year, Michigan still has good defensive players. So this will tell us a lot. It'll also tell us a lot whether or not USC has taken the steps forward that they really need to take, because, if you think about it, there were a lot of people that thought that Lincoln Riley would be one of those coaches that possibly could be on the hot seat when the season started. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because, are people going to be believers that USC has improved? This would be a game, if they win, it would help with some of that, but it will also give us maybe a little more of a barometer just where Michigan sits.
Paul Keels, voice of the Buckeyes. You'll hear him this Saturday, Ohio State, Illinois. Noon kickoff. Pregame coverage will begin at 10:30 right here on 1410 ESPN Radio. Paul Keels, appreciate you, sir. We'll talk next week.
Sounds good, Justin. Take care.
All right, good stuff. Again, Paul Keels, every Thursday, kicks off the show with us. Appreciate his time, as always. We'll step away for a few moments, and we'll pick up with some college football talk. The Cleveland Browns, they pulled off another trade late last night into the morning, and we'll talk about, why did they do that? We'll get to all of that when we come back. It's the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits.
here on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, and we are back. I'm Justin Kinner with you here, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. Thank you to Paul Keels for giving us some time. You'll hear Paul Keels on the call coming up on Saturday. The Buckeyes on the road taking on Illinois in a battle of 1 versus 17. It's kind of why. I mean, look, we're already approaching the mid-October point. I mean, we're just a month and some change away from the biggest rivalry in all of sports. I mean, that's pretty wild. That's pretty wild that we're getting that close to that. But I want to talk. I know we've talked a lot of NFL this week. There's just a lot happening. I mean, Cleveland is just making a lot of moves. I mean, so we'll talk about the Browns moving on from Greg Newsome in just a moment. But I want to get to this. A lot of people bringing up, why haven't the Browns announced? And if they have, and I haven't seen it in the last half hour, an hour, that's on me. But why haven't the Browns named Shedeur as the backup quarterback in Cleveland? Why have they not just look? I mean, you would process of elimination. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel's your starting quarterback. Joe Flacco was your backup quarterback. Shedeur was your third string quarterback. Cleveland Browns earlier in the week, they move on. They move on from Joe Flacco, who was your backup quarterback in the 2 slot. So that spot opens up. Why would you just not, you rearrange the decks on you rearrange the boats on the Titanic. You just kind of move everything up. Right? You just kind of shift it up a little bit. Yeah, you just take Shedeur, he takes that 2 spot, and then Bailey Zappi takes that 3rd spot. Why are we making this difficult? And everyone's, of course, the Browns are just screwing this up. They're trying to, no matter what, the Browns screwed up when they drafted Shedeur from the get-go. So that's strike 1. Strike 2 is they let the outside noise dictate their decision making, because I think I think they've been beat up on for so long. That now I think they pay way too much attention. I was listening to some sports talk over in Cleveland earlier today. Ken Carman was saying the same thing about they have to stop listening and letting the noise outside the building dictate their decisions, because everyone has had nothing but negative things to say about the Browns their whole entire existence, and listening to that obviously isn't going to make them make the right decisions at this point. So here's why I believe the Cleveland Browns are not going to move Shedeur up to the number 2 spot as the backup quarterback. We talked about it on yesterday's show. Deshaun Watson is very, very close to returning. And that's going to be very noisy. And what you don't want is, and now you have 2, by the way, very polarizing quarterbacks on this roster. You have Deshaun Watson and you have Shedeur Sanders. And they're both polarizing for completely different reasons. Right? And when Deshaun Watson comes back, it's going to be noisy. But when Deshaun Watson comes back, you have to decide what you're going to do with him. You know what? You're not going to make Deshaun Watson. You're not going to make him your 3rd string quarterback. There's a good possibility you make him the backup quarterback. And you know what happens if you make him the backup quarterback? That means you got to move Shedeur Sanders back down the depth chart. If you think it's loud right now, not moving him up the depth chart, how loud do you think it gets when you move him up the depth chart to number 2 and then slide him back down to number 3 when, of all people, Deshaun Watson comes back, and they very well could just move Deshaun Watson back into the starter spot? Because keep in mind, Cleveland, they need answers to a lot of things. They need to know if Shedeur is good and if he could play. They need to know if Dylan Gabriel is good and that he could play. And guess who else they need to know if he's good and could play? Because he's under contract for a few more years. That's Deshaun Watson. You have him on contract for 2 more years after this. So this idea that this is just the last year of a contract and you just got to, eat the contract and just let it sit out, that's not the case. Because if Dylan Gabriel is really, really good and you have your franchise quarterback moving forward, problem solved. If Shedeur Sanders is your franchise quarterback and he's proven it and you have your quarterback moving forward, problem solved. If Deshaun Watson all of a sudden just magically comes back from this Achilles injury and all of a sudden just for whatever reason decides to return back to Houston Texans form, well, there's been a lot of problems up to this point, but hey, problem solved. But the likelihood of any of those problems being solved with any of those outcomes that I just displayed, very, very unlikely. But I tell you what, if there's truth serum right now that you could provide to Andrew Berry and into the ownership and the Haslams, if you could guarantee that one of these quarterbacks works, who do you want it to be? Do you need Shedeur to work? Do you need Dylan Gabriel? I think the one that you need to work is Deshaun Watson. I think you need that to work as far as that's concerned. So I think that the reason that they are not putting Shedeur Sanders in at backup quarterback is because of the noise that it's going to create when they demote him from backup quarterback back to third string. You might as well just leave him at the third string spot. Put Bailey Zappi as the backup quarterback. Zappi can go in if something happens to Dylan Gabriel. Who cares? This team's not going anywhere right now. They're not going anywhere right now. And when Deshaun comes back in a few weeks, they'll be able, or in a month or whenever it is, you just don't want to create more chaos, more headlines, more noise. And there's noise coming. There is more noise coming when Deshaun Watson returns. There's going to be even more noise coming when they have to take Shedeur Sanders and move him back down to that third string slot. That's why I believe everyone's trying to speculate today. What are the Browns doing? That they're ruining this whole thing. Keep in mind, Shedeur was kind of forced upon the coaching staff. I don't think the Browns are messing this up. I think the ownership messed it up. People are kind of out on Kevin Stefanski right now. I think Stefanski's holding his ground. I didn't want Shedeur Sanders. I wanted this guy. And I'm kind of, and as I've stated before, I'm always going to trust Stefanski on this a little bit because his job's on the line. So if this idea that Shedeur Sanders is clearly the better quarterback, well, Stefanski, your job's on the line. Why would you go with the less talented quarterback? He's not. He's not going with the less talented quarterback. He's going with the more talented quarterback because that gives him the best opportunity to keep his job. This is what happened. They went with Joe Flacco at the beginning of the season to try to win games because that's how you – here's how Stefanski keeps his job. There's two ways that Stefanski keeps his job. The first one is you win, which is why Joe Flacco was named the starter at the beginning of the season. Why would the Browns start a 41-year-old quarterback when you have two rookie quarterbacks that you need to know if they could play? Because even if they can't play, selfishly, Stefanski's like, if we don't win, I won't be here to coach them anyway, so I have to win games to save my job for the time being. So that's why Joe Flacco started. When winning games became unrealistic, the next best possibility for Kevin Stefanski to keep his job is to prove that he can coach these rookies in his system and coach them up. That's the second best way to keep his job. That's why Joe Flacco started, because the best way to keep your job is to win. He gave him the best opportunity to win starting in week 1. Once that was not a possibility, the second best way to keep your job is to prove to ownership that the two rookies that you invested draft picks into at quarterback, that they could develop and improve with Kevin Stefanski, the way Baker Mayfield did, right? We've seen that when you get a high caliber rookie quarterback that's actually talented, it works with Kevin Stefanski. So that's where we're at. We're on phase 2 right now of him trying to keep his job. And when Dylan Gabriel gets to a point where he can't prove that he can, keep this job or win the Browns games or show that he's getting better each week, stage 3 of the to keep his job is to throw Shedeur Sanders out there and show that, okay, we could win with him. There's 3 phases to Stefanski keeping his job, and you don't want to keep getting deeper and deeper into those phases. You want to prove that you can win right away. That's why Shedeur is not number 2 on this depth chart right now. It's going to be noisy. Deshaun's coming back. And like I said earlier, Stefanski, the best way to prove that you can keep your job is that you can get the quarterback right. If Deshaun comes back and looks the part and he's comfortable in Stefanski's offense, guess what? Let's not rock the boat. Let's keep it going. But if he comes back and he's bad and Dylan Gabriel doesn't look good and then Shedeur doesn't look good, well, then what the hell are we doing? Let's just throw all this out, scrap it, and start all over the Cleveland Browns way. All right, good stuff. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. I see some calls coming in. I'm solo today in the studio, so I'll take your calls and get your spot in line during the commercial break. 937-518-1410. Give the show a call, and we'll discuss this more. Why do you believe the Browns have not named Shedeur Sanders the backup quarterback? Why would they not name him the backup? Well, doesn't it just seem so too easy? Dylan Gabriel's the starter. Your backup quarterback was Joe Flacco. You moved on from Joe Flacco. Shedeur just moves right on up the depth chart, right? Why are they making this harder than it has to be? Like I stated, I believe when Deshaun Watson comes back within the next month, it's going to create more noise taking Shedeur and moving him down the depth chart than it is not moving him up to begin with. What say you? 937-518-1410. We'll discuss more when we come back.
Get legal. 2689 Commons, Dayton.
All right, and we are back. I'm Justin Kinner with you here, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM, 937-518-1410. That's the number to call and jump in on the conversation. So, been a busy week for the Cleveland Browns. It's been a busy week for the Cincinnati Bengals, and it's kind of, it's re-energized Browns and Bengals talk this week, which I appreciate. Shout out to Paul Keels for kicking the show off with us as we opened up previewing Ohio State and Illinois, a top 25 showdown coming up this Saturday, noon kickoff, 10:30 pregame coverage begins. Keith Byers and I, by the way, we will be in Troy on Saturday at Submarine House for the Buckeye Tailgate. Come on out. Hang out with Byers. We'll have some prizes. We'll be getting you signed up for some Ohio State tickets. We'll get you all taken care of. So come on out and see us in Troy at Submarine House this Saturday. So Before we took a little pause in the action, we're talking about the Browns and the handling of Shedeur Sanders. And look, I'm a Browns fan. I'm over the Shedeur Sanders talk. I want Shedeur Sanders to be the guy, but he's not the guy. Shedeur Sanders came out just about an hour ago and said that whatever the Browns role have for him is he's thankful. You could tell that there's been certain people in his circle that have said, all right, let's dial back the over-the-top confidence that's being mistaken for arrogance, and however you want to take that, that's fine. Kevin Stefanski yesterday was non-committal on whether Sanders or practice squad quarterback Bailey Zappi would be the backup to rookie quarterback Dylan Gabriel for this week's game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Keep in mind, all of this is being brought up because of the aftermath of what happened with trading Joe Flacco to within the division to the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, I immediately, when I read that, I'm like, oh, cool. Shedeur's, that's going to shut some people up. He's going to move up the depth chart. He'll be the backup. That's not the case. Kevin Stefanski continuing to be non-committal. So everyone's just weighing it. And the Browns are screwing this up. They're trying to screw over Shedeur Sanders. I think Shedeur Sanders is not as good as what everyone said he was coming into the draft, and that's being proven here. I've said before, the Browns have been the most desperate organization for a quarterback for 3 decades now. This idea that they've stumbled across a really talented quarterback and they're purposely keeping him buried on the depth chart is the most idiotic thing I think I've ever heard from anybody. Let's just be clear. Kevin Stefanski's trying to keep his job. Andrew Berry's trying to keep his job. The Haslams are trying to prove that they don't have a joke of an organization. Why in the blue hell would they have a super, super talented quarterback buried on the bench when that guy could solve all their problems? You could just think about it, guys. It's really not that hard. I know it's this obsession you guys have with hating on the Browns. What do we want to call it? Browns derangement syndrome. Maybe we can call it that. I don't really know where we can go with that. But like the point is you guys are so obsessed with hating the Browns that you guys don't make sense. The Browns aren't screwing this up. He's just not talented enough. And he's not the guy. There's too many guys who are coaching and trying to perform for their careers. Why would they risk it all by burying a super talented individual on the bench? That's not happening. The other thing is, why would the Browns not make Shedeur the number 2 quarterback on the depth chart? Why would they not just announce that he's the backup? It's so simple. It's so easy. Joe Flacco was the starter. They benched him for Dylan Gabriel. Joe Flacco remained number 2 on the depth chart. That led to a lot of drama. You now trade that number 2 quarterback away to Cincinnati. That number 2 spot opens up. Just slide him in there. Why would they not do it? Because, there's another loud and noisy dilemma that's developing behind the scenes that no one's really talking about. Deshaun Watson has been, training, and he's been healing up quicker than anticipated, and he's probably going to be ready to go within the next month. So guess what happens? You take Shedeur Sanders, you move him up to number 2 on the depth chart. And then in a month when Deshaun Watson comes back, now you got to look at our guy Shedeur here and say, hey, thanks, but we're demoting you back down to 3rd string. Guess what happens then? World War III. The Browns are thinking ahead to trying to take control of this narrative. And if you move him up the depth chart just to move him back down here in a month, that's going to just create a whole long mess. I'm telling you right now, I wanted Shedeur to be the guy. Winning Dylan Gabriel, if you could win with Dylan Gabriel or win with Shedeur Sanders, I'd rather win with Shedeur Sanders because he has that moxie. He has that it factor. He has that charisma. He has that superstar personality. He just doesn't have that superstar talent. I would rather the Browns be able to win with him. Trust me, even with all his personality and everything. Joe Burrow's personality is obnoxious, but when they win, he gets away with it. When he acts cocky and arrogant when they lose, he looks kind of ridiculous, right? Like, that's how all this works. So if Shedeur, with that personality, can go out there and win, my goodness, I don't think there's anyone that would have more star quality than him. But he's not the guy. And I'm so tired of listening to sports media throughout the day talk about how the Browns are screwing this up, that they have a super talented quarterback that they're just burying on the bench. I'm telling you, that's not the case. This organization has been desperate for a quarterback for 3 decades. You have a head coach who's on the hot seat, a GM who's on the hot seat, and an owner trying to prove that he doesn't have a joke of an organization. Why would they take the answer to all their problems and bury him on the bench if that's truly the case? It's not that hard. But Like I said, I believe that they're not moving him up the depth chart because they know they're going to have to move him back down the depth chart when Deshaun comes back here around the corner. And I think that's what this comes down to. What say you? 937-518-1410. Why do you believe the Browns are not moving Shedeur up the depth chart? Let's go to AJ. AJ, thanks for holding, sir. You're live.
Hey, what's up, Justin? Hey, rarely do I call in and comment on the Browns because I'm a Bengals fan and I hate to be negative, and it's always negativity around the Browns. Hate to take a shot at you, but
No,
it is what it is.
I'm numb to it now.
Dude, the whole AFC North, I mean, outside of the Browns is a crap show. I mean, it's unbelievable what's going on, but you hit the nail on the head, man. Like, Stefanski's fighting for his job. Shedeur is not the answer. If he was, he would be playing. I mean, these guys evaluate talent for their that's their career. And if he's not even able to get up into the second spot based on his level of talent, like, you know, a coach isn't going to take a flyer on him. And then you're absolutely right on the Deshaun Watson thing. They're paying him a lot of money.
Yeah.
And if he is available, Haslam's going to have him come back. And that's not even really a Stefanski call, I don't think. I think it's a Jimmy Haslam call. And I rarely do I have sympathy for NFL coaches, but I have a lot of sympathy for what Stefanski's going through now, because I know he's a really good coach, and his hands are tied with a lot of these decisions. It was tied with Shedeur. Now his hands are going to be tied with Deshaun Watson too. It's not good.
No, it's not. But if one of these quarterbacks can hit, that's the answer to all their problems. I don't know if it's Dylan Gabriel. Was I impressed with how he looked? I think he looked solid, but I didn't get all warm and fuzzy inside. Like when I watched Joe Burrow for the first time, I was pissed off. Now I was pissed off because I'm a Browns fan, and I was like, damn it, they got one. That's you know what I mean? You know what I want? I want Cleveland to throw out a rookie quarterback that pisses off Bengals fans so that you guys could feel what I did when I saw Burrow roll out for you guys the first time and say, damn it, they got one. And I just don't think that's Dylan Gabriel. I just don't. Not yet, anyways.
Justin, it's 30 years of ifs, man. My grandmother had this saying, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, every day would be Christmas. And
yeah, there's another one, too, that I can't say on air. But, yes, yeah, there's a lot of those. AJ, you the man. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Justin. See you.
All right, 937-518-1410. Let's go to Jack. Jack, how are you, sir? Thanks for holding.
Does it work?
Hey, Jack.
What costs $7.12?
What costs $7, Jack? Jack, you're on live. What are you doing? Hey. Jack. All right, we're hanging up on Jack. He had his opportunity. Let's go to Dickie. Dickie, how are you, my friend? Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday, Justin.
What you up to? What you up to today?
I want to refresh your memory. I was going, as you know, I worked at Lowe's.
Yeah.
And I can remember taking some classes, and I know I was listening to the radio. The only quarterback to ever beat Pittsburgh, they had a 16-year jinx. Brian, Bernie Kosar could beat that team. You know, I think there were 0-16 in Three Rivers, but he had they won under him. You know, and I remember in '88 there, he was the most consistent person to beat Pittsburgh, Justin, you know?
Do you think that Dylan Gabriel can get off to a good start and beat Pittsburgh?
Maybe.
No,
Maybe,
that didn't sound like confidence, Dickie. Come on, where's the confidence? Where's that passion?
I think, yeah, I wanted him to do that because I was disappointed. Flacco did not look good. I thought he didn't look good, Justin.
Well, that's the big thing for Cincinnati. Did Joe Flacco not look good because he's 41 years old, or did he not look good because the Browns didn't have weapons around him? I think we're going to get that answer on Sunday when the Bengals play the Packers. I think another bad thing. This is why I was confused as to why they traded him within the division, because I think if Joe Flacco goes and kills it with the Bengals, a division rival, I think that's going to make the Browns look even worse in this particular situation.
Yeah, and I wanted to say hello to one of my friends. Ed.
Say hello to him.
Ed. Ed was my buddy. We talked, and his son worked there. He had a hat.
Talking about Big E?
Ed. Yeah. He used to come see me at Lowe's. He's a great big Browns fan.
Mm-hmm. I haven't heard from Big E in a while.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say, what do you think their chances are, Justin? I'm going to go that the defense will win the game.
Well, that's the thing. If the defense wins the game, I feel good about a win. But I think just one time, I want to see the offense go out there and just be something that's a problem for an opponent. And I would love to see Dylan Gabriel and Quinshon Judkins go into Pittsburgh on Sunday and be a problem for Pittsburgh because their defense isn't very good. Pittsburgh's a 5.5-point favorite. Steelers defense, it's solid. There's some names on there, but they have not been very good to start the season defensively. They gave up 34 or 32 points against the Jets, of course, 31 points to the Seahawks, so we'll see what happens. But the defense is vulnerable. I would love to see the offense be why Cleveland goes out and wins a game on Sunday, as opposed to just, winning an ugly one because the defense kept you in it. But Cleveland, beggars can't be choosers. They desperately need a win no matter how it looks. But Dickie, you got 15 seconds, Dickie. Make it quick.
Yeah. What do you think of Andres Siciliano? Do you like him?
Yeah, you asked that the last time. Yeah, I think he's doing a great job.
Yeah. Of course, Jimmy Donovan always talked about me, didn't he?
Every time. But, Dickie, I appreciate the call as always.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. 937-518-1410. That's the number to call and jump in on the conversation. Jack, if you're out there, I'll get to your call coming up here around the corner. I see Mike and Eric, and I think that's Tim. I'm not sure. On hold. We'll get to your guys' calls more coming up in a moment. We're also live on the Justin Kinner Show Facebook page. Damon Hahn is tuning in, and he messages into the show and lets his opinion be known that the Browns had one. His name is Baker. Baker, touchdown maker. Let's not do that. I was the biggest Baker defender. But I'm also not going to do this whole act like I wasn't okay with the Browns moving on from Baker when they did. I think we all were. Deep down, I would love to see. I guarantee you everyone's going to lie and say, no, I knew it was a mistake from the beginning to move on from Baker. No, you didn't. Because Baker did not look good in his last year in Cleveland. He didn't look good with the Panthers. All right. Multiple teams moved on from him after Cleveland as well. So this idea that Cleveland just let this amazing, talented quarterback go and just, and the next team that swooped in and got him just was fully benefited from it. That's not the case. That's not the case. Baker is an amazing story. There is not many examples in the NFL where quarterbacks get drafted by a team and it doesn't work out and then they go elsewhere and they flourish. There's no other quarterback that's done that. Name another quarterback that has been drafted by a team and it didn't work out and then they go elsewhere and flourish. I see someone messaging Jared Goff. Jared Goff, that's not a good comparison because Jared Goff, he worked out with the Rams. He worked out just fine. Jared Goff led the Rams to a Super Bowl. Jared Goff is now one of the top quarterbacks with Detroit. So, no, I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's many quarterbacks that have not worked out somewhere and then gone elsewhere and just all of a sudden turned into an amazing quarterback. Maybe Sam Darnold is knocking on that door a little bit. I need to see more of it. So Javi says Sam Darnold. I need to see a little more, but that might be the case. But he's not been a difference maker. Last year, everyone wasn't really buying into the Sam Darnold storyline. And, anytime they played a good team, he disappeared. And the playoffs got there, he disappeared. I want to see more of it, but you're technically not wrong, Javi. That's the next closest name I could think of. I would not put Jared Goff in that conversation because he was good with the Rams. He led the Rams to a Super Bowl, right? So this idea that he was so bad with the Rams that they just moved on from him, and then all of a sudden he just exploded with the Lions, that's not really the case as far as that goes. But Damon, he said he didn't look good because he played with the bum shoulder. And then the year before that, he was good. The year before that, he wasn't good. Then good his rookie year. There was way too many inconsistencies. I did not think that the Browns I thought that the Browns had a very good quarterback in Baker Mayfield. I also never felt like they had a quarterback that was going to take them to a Super Bowl because the Baker that he was in Cleveland, that wasn't it. He ran his mouth a lot. He was a distraction. The locker room, him and Myles Garrett didn't get along. Him and Odell Beckham Jr. didn't get along. Let's not pretend like those things didn't happen. Let's not pretend. And when you don't get along with all these guys on your roster and you were just an average quarterback, you're not going to win that very often. Baker was not this Baker that he is now. I'm so tired of hearing that every Sunday I have to open my phone to, I bet you wish that Baker was in Cleveland. I wish that was the Baker that was in Cleveland. Oh, I bet you wish Baker was in Cleveland now. I wish that was the Baker that was in Cleveland, and he never would have put the Browns in a position to have to look at Deshaun to begin with. But no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that because everyone during that time was ripping the Browns, saying they're going to be the stupidest franchise ever to give Baker Mayfield. And at this time, it was a lot of money, 35 or 40 million, because that was about the rate. Because I think at that time, Patrick Mahomes had just got his $45 million deal at that time. And that just seemed like an insane amount. I mean, that was Patrick Mahomes' money. And now because the market, you got to give Baker Mayfield that money in Cleveland, that 35 to 40 range. And everyone said Cleveland's screwed if they give him that money. You guys were all ripping Cleveland for even considering paying him. And you know what I mean? Like that's the thing. People just block out these ridiculous narratives that I was fighting on this very show years and years ago. And now all of a sudden, Baker was so great in Cleveland that you had to pay him at the time. Baker in Cleveland was not the Baker that he is now. Period. You're not going to get me with that one. I'm not going to let that one go. As far as that's concerned. But Javi says, I always had faith in Baker. Yeah, Ron, so Ron here, shout out to Ron. Ron is he's a Buccaneers fan. And Ron was one of my biggest on-air adversaries when he would call in, ripping the Browns and ripping Baker Mayfield. And now he loves Baker Mayfield. He loves Baker Mayfield, as he should, because you have the Baker Mayfield that Browns fans wish they had when he was there. But he wasn't that. He wasn't that. He wasn't who he is now. Now, you could say, oh, well, you got to give him time to develop. Possibly, yes. But there's not a lot of quarterbacks that truly develop. Like, Joe Burrow was Joe Burrow. And I'm not saying he didn't get better as years went on, but you knew you had something with Joe Burrow. You knew you had something with Patrick Mahomes. You knew you had something with Lamar Jackson. The Washington Commanders knew they had something with Jaden Daniels. All right? The Texans knew they had something with C.J. Stroud. Like, you have something right away in today's NFL. These quarterbacks are more ready than they've ever been before. They come into the NFL, you know what you have. Very rarely do you come across a quarterback like Josh Allen, by the way. Josh Allen didn't come out guns a-blazing either, but he also, in that 4-year period, he was okay year 1, solid year 2, blossomed in year 3, and took off in year 4. He made it easy for them to pay him. Baker was good his rookie year. Ran his mouth, came into camp out of shape, and then was not very good his second year, and then was solid his third year, and then was bad his fourth year with more distractions, more comments about other teammates' money and all this stuff. And, obviously, getting into it with coaches and this, that, and the other. Let's not pretend like that didn't happen. Let's not pretend that was not the same trajectory as Josh Allen. Baker Mayfield, it took 6 years before the league looked at him and said, maybe the dude could play. It's not the same thing, not even close. So there you go. Treg, what up, Treg? Treg says, I'm taking the Bengals plus 14.5 this weekend. Treg, I'm taking the Bengals to cover. I'm not taking them to win. I think that they cover. I think, a lot of times when you have these types of quarterback changes, or sometimes you'll have a coaching change in the middle of the season, you'll get that big burst of accelerated play. You'll get guys who play up to the occasion a bit. And I think that because they're on the road, there's even that extra element there. I think that the fact that they're on the road could be a major factor that works against them. I actually think it helps them. I think they're all going to go in with the utmost confidence of who's their quarterback, a veteran quarterback. And, when you look at Jake Browning, he feels like a backup quarterback. Flacco may be a backup quarterback, but the mystique of Flacco is he doesn't have that backup quarterback vibe to him. And I think the Bengals roster as a whole is going to feel confident going to battle with him leading the offense, even with all their deficiencies, not being able to protect the quarterback, not being able to run the football, and the defense being a clown show. So I think they're going to overlook that stuff because of the confidence that he's going to instill into them. So yes, I'm going to take the Bengals plus 14.5, no doubt. Treg says at one time draft day, I thought Manziel was their guy. Yes, I know your Manziel story there, Treg. Damon says, what I am saying is as a Bengals fan, I hated Cleveland with Baker. Yeah, but you guys act like Baker was why they were beating Cincinnati. It was Myles Garrett and that defense. The Browns beat up on Cincinnati with Tyrod Taylor. They beat up on Cincinnati with Baker Mayfield. They beat up on the Bengals with Deshaun Watson. They've beat up on the Bengals with so many different quarterbacks. It wasn't the quarterback. It's that defense of Cleveland, no doubt about it. But nonetheless, all right, good stuff. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. If you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Facebook, please give the show a like. When you hit those little like buttons, that helps with the algorithm of the show, and I appreciate it nonetheless. Give it a like. There you go. Hour 2 coming up next. The Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. More of the show when we come back.
The Justin Kinner Show. Right here on 1410 ESPN.
All right, and we are back. I'm Justin Kenner with you here, Dayton's ESPN Radio 1410 Wing AM. College football. So we kicked off the show with Paul Keels. If you missed that conversation, we have that coming up for you here around the corner. A lot of big games in college football this weekend. I want to focus in on the Big Ten real quick. We assume that it's Oregon and Ohio State in a crash course collision right now, geared up for the Big Ten championship game on December 7th. And when we get there, I mean, it just seems like, with everything going on, it's just all about those two teams. When we get to that November 6th, I should say, not 7th, December 6th. I'm all over the place here. The Big Ten championship game on December 6th is going to feature Ohio State and Oregon. But Penn State, they've stubbed their toe not once, but twice. I do believe that creates it. And by the way, earlier when I asked Paul Keels about, is Ohio State, is that game basically a must win now for Penn State? Penn State's in that every game's a must win moving forward. Penn State plays Northwestern this weekend. They are at Iowa and then a bye week. And then they are at Ohio State against Indiana. And then Michigan State, Nebraska, Rutgers. Based on what we've seen from Penn State, I don't think look, UCLA and Penn State, they're not on equal playing ground. Good for UCLA. They got the win. They're not going to lose to a bad team the rest of the way. They're not going to lose to Iowa, although they could make it ugly. They're not going to lose to Michigan State. They're not going to lose to Rutgers. Rutgers is okay, but it's Rutgers. There are a couple of pitfalls I see coming. Like, I could see them. So Jason Fitz was on the show with us earlier this week, and he said what this has done is it has now opened the door to them potentially being vulnerable to not losing just 2 or 3 games, but possibly 4. Because I think the third loss is coming. I think that Ohio State does beat Penn State. Now, here's where things get super chaotic. What happens if Penn State beats Ohio State? It's not really that chaotic. I mean, that would be Ohio State's only loss. Penn State would move into the top 25. Ohio State's only loss would be a top 25 team. They would still hold wins over Texas and potentially Illinois coming up this Saturday. I feel pretty confident in that. But I look at Penn State's schedule and I see potential back-to-back losses. Ohio State, and then they play Indiana. I think Indiana has so much to gain this weekend against Oregon, it's not even funny. Like, I feel like this is a humongous game for Indiana this weekend because I think people want to buy into Indiana. People want to believe that Indiana is the real deal. And the best way to do that is to go against the number 3 team in the country and either beat them or make them work for the win. Because Indiana last year was a fantastic story, a fun story. You have Cincinnati who comes over from James Madison, and it's not like he came over from Alabama and brought a bunch of good Alabama players with them, and then all of a sudden Indiana's good. I mean, this idea that, well, they were good because they brought players with them. He brought players from his previous team. Yeah, James Madison. And so this idea that James Madison players can go to a program like Indiana and all of a sudden make them relevant in the Big Ten is just kind of crazy to me, right? Like that's just wild at the end of the day, when you really think about it. So, I sit here in this situation, I'm taking a look at this, and I'm like, Indiana, if you just hang tough with Oregon, that's already a way to change the perception of the program because last year, they come in, Cincinnati comes in, brings his players, they start winning and winning a lot. They do beat Michigan, but Michigan was bad last year, but that was a brand win. That was a very important win for Indiana because that was a brand win. They beat a brand, and that's very important. But then, you didn't play many good teams last year, so you play Ohio State and you get pushed around and beat up on. Oh, that's fine. That's your only loss of the season. Okay, fine. And actually, that loss was a good thing. That loss to Ohio State kept them out of the Big Ten championship game, so that was good for Indiana because they were able to ride that one loss into the postseason. The problem is they played another real team in Notre Dame who ultimately went to the national championship game, and they got pushed and shoved and bullied and embarrassed. So I think because of last year, we saw them win a lot of games. They were good enough to beat average to bad teams, but when it came to playing contenders, they proved that they didn't belong. They're playing another They played a top 25 Illinois team a few weeks ago, and had they won like 27-24, it would be a good, huge win, a top 25 win, but it would just be a solid win. But because they absolutely demolished a top 10 Illinois team a few weeks ago, that has them on everybody's radar. There's a reason that Indiana is in the top 10 now. And if Indiana, who's ranked number 7, hangs with the number 3 team in the country, or heaven forbid, beats them, I mean, now we're talking about something different. because last year it was cute. They won a lot of games against average to bad teams, but when they played real teams, they got exposed. They beat up on and demolished and embarrassed a top 10 Illinois team. If they beat Oregon or just hang in there with Oregon on Saturday, that's that extra layer now. That's that new level that Indiana will reach when it comes to having everyone buy in to Indiana being a legit contender moving forward. Because if Indiana loses to Oregon and gets blown out, and Oregon, by the way, only a 7.5-point favorite. Kudos to Indiana. Even Vegas believes that they have a puncher's shot here. I mean, a 7.5-point line is not a small line, but it's just a hair over a possession line. So I'm like, maybe they do have a shot. But if Indiana can keep it within 10, if Indiana loses by 10 to the number 3 team in the country, 10 or less, I'll buy into Indiana being a problem moving forward. But yeah, Indiana, Oregon, I'm excited about that. That's in Eugene. It's a 3:30 kickoff on CBS. Indiana has a ton to prove. Look, Penn State, they're not playing anyone of significance this week, of course, so they're just going to go into Northwestern, and you would like to think that they would demolish them. But yeah, Penn State not ranked right now, obviously, with those 2 losses, and it wasn't just a loss, it was a bad loss. I mean, I remember week 2, Notre Dame was 0-2 and still in the top 25. Okay, we're a month and a half in. We're starting to know who these teams are. Penn State at home welcoming in Northwestern. Penn State a 21.5-point favorite. I think Penn State's going to just demolish Northwestern and just play pissed off. And that was the wake-up call last week. The sad thing was, and I heard Joel Klatt, I was listening to Joel Klatt on the Herd earlier in the week, and he brought up a good point. He goes, shame on James Franklin and that coaching staff for allowing Penn State to lose to Oregon twice. Because you lost to Oregon the week before and you spent the rest of the week pouting and sulking. You didn't prepare for UCLA and got punched in the mouth. You lost to them twice. And that kind of reminds me of what could have happened last year against Michigan. The line that I kept hearing from Joe Klatt, and I love his phrasing of this. I like Joe Klatt. I think he does a great job. He gets a little humoristic over, he is Fox's Paul Feinbaum, by the way. He is the Big Ten's Paul Feinbaum. Anyone that disagrees with that, I mean, you just, this is why, we all just like people that tell us what we want to hear, and he tells you what you want to hear. So when he's carrying the flag for the Big Ten, of course you think, oh man, he's really smart. He's not like an idiot like Paul Feinbaum. Paul Feinbaum knows what the hell he's talking about. He's just not saying the things about your team that you want him to, so therefore you think he's an idiot. It's not how that works, but it's besides the point. But I loved Joe Klatt's take last year on Ohio State when they lost to Michigan, because he said Ryan Day's job after that loss to Michigan was to make sure, although they had lost to Michigan 4 straight years, don't lose to Michigan in back-to-back games in the same season. And what he meant by that is don't let the hangover from the Michigan loss carry over into the Tennessee game. And clearly, Ryan Day and that coaching staff and the leaders in that locker room prevented that from happening. Clearly, James Franklin and that coaching staff and the leaders in that locker room don't possess those same traits. Because I love that line. I'm saying it again. I love that phrasing from Joel Klatt. Shame on that coaching staff for allowing Oregon to beat them twice. Actually beat them in the game, in the head-to-head, and then Penn State spent the rest of the week pouting and sulking and ultimately lost it when it's all said and done. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. But Penn State, Northwestern, Oregon, Indiana, I cannot wait for that one. And then Michigan and USC. Who is USC right now? I mean, they lost to Illinois at Illinois a couple weeks ago. By the way, I will say this. If USC beats Michigan and Illinois hangs in there with Ohio State, I think USC, I'm going to view them a little bit differently. I think Illinois is a solid team. We're going to learn, this week, what I can't wait for is I can't wait to see if Illinois is for real and if Indiana is for real. And the cool thing about that is Indiana doesn't have to win for me to buy in, and neither does Illinois. But if Illinois can give resistance to Ohio State and make Ohio State act like Minnesota didn't provide resistance for Ohio State. Washington provided a little. Defensively provided it. Offensively, there was no real, with this great, that's the wild thing. Washington has an elite quarterback, a wide receiver, a fantastic running back. There was no resistance given to that defense whatsoever, right? So if Illinois can give some kind of resistance to that Buckeye defense, the best defense in the country, I'll look at them different. Same thing with Indiana. If they give resistance to Oregon, I'll buy in. USC has to be pulling for that resistance from Illinois this weekend and Indiana, really so Illinois more than anything, mainly because USC went to Illinois and they lost 34-32 in a close one. So if they lose to a team that proved that they can hang with the number one team in the country in Ohio State and USC beats Michigan this Saturday, now USC is going to be viewed as, okay, maybe not the favorites to win the Big Ten, but a shot to make some noise and obviously contend for a playoff spot down the road because USC has a big opportunity. USC, I mean, my goodness, good for them. I mean, they played at Illinois, losing 34-32, a top 25 loss, yes, but they are at home against Michigan this Saturday for a 7:30 p.m. kickoff on NBC, by the way. And then the very next week, they are at Notre Dame for another 7:30 NBC kickoff as well. Back-to-back night games for the Trojans and a chance in primetime back-to-back weeks to put the entire country on notice that they're a legit contender in the Big Ten. But this stretch right here, it's not like the stretch South Carolina's on in the SEC, but this isn't an easy stretch by any means. On the road at Illinois, where they lost 34-32, they're at home in a night game against top 15 Michigan. Then they're at number 16 Notre Dame the following week, and then at Nebraska after that. And Nebraska is a very capable team. And then, oh yeah, you have Northwestern and Iowa at home for a few weeks, and then you got to go to Oregon in your second to last game of the season. If USC gets to the playoffs, this is this schedule is unbelievable. This is a hell of a schedule. You know, they played Missouri State and Georgia Southern to start, and Purdue and Michigan State played a bunch of nobodies, but they made them look like nobodies. They put 70 points up against Missouri State, 59-20 against Georgia Southern, right? Like they blew out those bad teams. And that's the crazy part. You beat Illinois like you're supposed to. I think we're looking at USC in a completely different light at this point, but they're not ranked, and they have an opportunity against a ranked team in Michigan this weekend. And I'm like I said, the Big Ten's just provided big game after big game, week in and week out, and that's one that I'm really looking forward to because I think there's a lot of dominoes that are going to start to fall as we're embarking within the next month on the very first college football playoff rankings. And, you know, it used to be when you put the rankings up for just 4 teams, okay, cool. You're paying attention to the top 4, maybe the top 6. Everyone else is irrelevant at that point. When you got 12 teams that could be in, I think it's 1 through 20 that all has a shot. And I think that that's what's going to make this so entertaining when these rankings start coming out. I think Indiana and Illinois are fascinating to me. I think USC is interesting. Michigan, by the way, I talked about it from USC's angle. If Michigan beats USC on the road in primetime, I think Michigan's going to move up those ranks and get into that top 10 conversation. And now Ohio State staring down the barrel of opening up the season against number 1 Texas. You have a chance against, you would think, a top 25 team possibly in Penn State, who was a championship contender coming into the year at home. And then to bookend the season with the Michigan potential matchup right there of a top 10 matchup. So we'll see. But a lot of dominoes are going to start falling over the coming weeks. This weekend, in my opinion, we're going to get a good feel of who the Big Ten is. USC or Michigan, which of those teams is for real? We'll find that out. Illinois, Indiana, are they just good storylines or are they good teams? We're going to find out this weekend. Right? Penn State, are they the mental, I don't know if you could say, are they the mentally weak team that they appeared to be after losing to UCLA because they were pouting for losing? Or are they going to come out mentally strong and just demolish Northwestern and say, okay, committee, we were willing to take the punishment for losing to UCLA, but we're not that. We're not the team that we were against UCLA. And that's the other thing I do love about the 12-team playoff. It's forgiving. It's been more forgiving than the 14 playoff because losing to Oregon in the 14 playoff era, Penn State still very much alive. Losing to an 0-4 UCLA team at the time, their playoff hopes are dead and buried. I don't think their playoff hopes are dead and buried right now. And that's why I kind of do like the 12-team playoff. It's because it's forgiving. It gives you a chance. Ohio State lost to Oregon and Michigan. They were forgiven. They were given a chance to get better. And because of that opportunity, they rode that to a national championship last year. Penn State could still do the same. They could still do the same. All right, good stuff. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. Paul Keels kicked off the show with us. If you missed it, we have that coming up next. We'll also hear from Jason Fitz around the corner as well. It's the Justin Kinner Show here on a Thursday, right here, 1410 ESPN Radio.